In the ashes of a brutal war, a human scavenger boards a wrecked enemy ship, expecting silence, but finding a wounded alien soldier aiming a gun at his head. One choice could end her life, but what he does instead ignites a chain of events that could end the war itself. Secrets buried deep in both governments are about to be exposed, and two enemies must trust each other to survive or die hunted by the very factions they once served. This isn't just about survival. It's about rewriting history. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Let's move toward wonderful story. Rowan Vale adjusted the flight controls as his ship Wanderlight drifted closer to the silent wreckage floating ahead. The remains of a Terran war cruiser hung like a broken monument in space, its once shining surface now scarred and torn by battle. Its hull was pierced in multiple places, jagged metal twisting outward like shattered bone. The asteroid belt around it made navigation tricky, but Rowan was used to danger. He had survived worse during the war. The war between humans and the Terran had burned across galaxies for nearly a decade. Millions had died. Cities had turned to ash. Rowan had once been a combat medic on the front lines, patching up bodies that never made it home. But he had left all that behind. Now, he was a salvager, drifting through wrecks, collecting parts and technology to sell to the highest bidder. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept him away from bloodshed. Or at least most of the time. Lunix, he said, speaking to his ship's AI. Run a scan. Life signs? The AI responded with a quiet buzz. Radiation interference. Scan inconclusive. Proceed with caution. Always do, Rowan muttered, pulling on his helmet and checking his oxygen level. 6 hours of air. More than enough if things went smoothly. He exited through the airlock and floated across the space between his ship and the ruined war cruiser. The emptiness around him pressed in like a thick blanket. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of his suit. As he reached the shattered entry port, he activated his boot's magnetic locks and stepped onto the alien vessel's hull. A dull clang echoed beneath his feet. With a beam cutter, he forced open a damaged hatch. Blue and white sparks danced as he sliced through the metal. The door gave way with a reluctant groan. Inside, the warship was dark. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting strange shadows on curved walls and oddly shaped control panels. The Terran built their ships tall and narrow, with sweeping designs and soft blue illumination. But now, it all looked like a broken memory. Rowan moved carefully. The artificial gravity was unstable, giving the feeling of walking underwater. Wires hung like vines from the ceiling. Scorch marks blackened the walls. He checked his scanner and marked a few intact devices to retrieve later. Crystalline processors, rare metals, anything that could be sold. But something about this ship felt wrong. Too quiet. Too empty. Lunix, he whispered through his comms. This place doesn't look looted. No bodies either. There are no nearby transmissions, the AI answered. But caution is advised. As he moved toward the command deck, a faint trail caught his eye. It shimmered faintly under his headlamp. Blue-green smears across the floor glowing softly. Terran blood. He knelt beside it. It was fresh. Someone had been here. Recently. Someone hurt. The trail led away from the bridge, down a narrow passage, designed for maintenance crews. It twisted through the heart of the ship, ending near a storage unit that looked half-collapsed. Rowan stepped closer, his hand drifting to the sidearm strapped to his leg. He heard it then, a faint sound, breathing, raspy and shallow. He raised his weapon and hit the panel. The door hissed open. Inside, an alien figure curled in the corner, half-conscious. Her copper-toned skin was covered in bioluminescent markings, most of which now pulsed a dim blue, a Terran sign of distress. She was badly wounded, a deep gash on her side leaking more of that glowing blood. One arm held a weapon loosely, her violet eyes locked onto his helmet. She didn't flinch. "Finish it," she said, her voice low and strained. "Do it." Rowan didn't speak. His hand stayed on the trigger. This was the moment. An enemy officer, alive, high rank, judging by her armor. The bounty would be enormous. But he didn't shoot. Instead, he lowered his weapon. "Not today," he muttered. She blinked slowly, confused. He knelt, pulling a med kit from his belt. "Hold still." "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice had strength in it now. "Suspicion." "Something stupid, probably," he replied. She didn't stop him. He injected her with a coagulant that should slow the bleeding. Her hand clenched around his arm. Her skin was hot, feverish. "You're helping me." "Why?" He looked at her, really looked. Not as a threat, not as a bounty, but as a person, broken and bleeding in the corner of a dying ship. "Because I've seen enough killing," Rowan said softly. "I left the war for a reason." "I'm not your prisoner," she warned. "Then don't act like one." The ship trembled beneath them. An alert pinged in his comms. "Rowan," Lunik said urgently. "An Alliance patrol ship is entering the system. Estimated arrival, 5 minutes." He met the Terran's eyes again. "Can you walk?" She stared at him, weighing 1,000 things. Then nodded. Rowan helped her up, supporting her weight. She was lighter than she looked, but every step was a struggle. Still, she didn't let go. "My name is Sayla," she said quietly as they moved. Rowan gave a tired smile. "Nice to meet you, Sayla. Let's get out of here." As they stepped back through the broken corridors, blue light trailing behind them, Rowan knew nothing. About this would be simple. But sometimes the hardest paths were the ones worth walking. Rowan guided Sayla through the damaged corridors of the alien ship as it groaned beneath their feet. She leaned on him, her breath uneven, but her eyes were alert. Every step took effort. Her injuries were serious, but there was no time to stop. The Alliance patrol would arrive soon, and Rowan knew what would happen if they found a human helping a Terran officer. There would be no trial, no questions, just bullets. They reached the airlock. Rowan secured Sayla to him with a safety strap and activated his thrusters, pushing them toward his ship. The wrecked war cruiser faded behind them as the stars stretched across the void. Inside the Wanderlight, Lunix greeted them with a calm voice. "Pressure stable. Medical systems on standby." Rowan lowered Sayla onto the medbay table. She winced but made no sound. He removed her armor carefully and ran a deeper scan. Internal bleeding, cracked ribs. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered erratically across her skin. She watched him with guarded eyes. "I can stabilize you," he said, "but you'll need rest." "Why?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it held the same confusion from before. "Why are you doing this?" Rowan didn't answer right away. Instead, he prepared the nanite injection and gently placed it against her side. "Because I'm tired of the killing. That's all." The injection hissed softly. Sayla's body tensed, then slowly relaxed. Her expression softened for a moment, then returned to its usual hardness. She was trained not to show weakness, but even warriors have limits. Rowan stepped away, removing his gloves. "We'll find a quiet place, somewhere safe for you to recover." Sayla turned her head to look at him. "There is no safe place. Not for someone like me." Before Rowan could respond, an alarm echoed through the ship. Lunix's voice came through, colder now. "2 vessels inbound. 1 Alliance, 1 Terran, both on intercept course." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "Working together?" Sayla sat up too quickly and grimaced. "That shouldn't be possible. The factions don't cooperate." "Not openly." "Well, they are now," Rowan said, moving to the cockpit. "Strap in. This isn't going to be a smooth ride." He launched the Wanderlight into the asteroid field, zigzagging between the massive rocks with practiced skill. Laser fire shot past them, missing by inches. Sayla stood behind him, one hand gripping the back of his seat, her other hand pressed to her ribs. "I can help," she said. "If I can access your communication array, I can create a false trail. Make them follow a signal that isn't there. Rowan glanced at her. You can do that? She nodded. Terran ships detect quantum shifts. I can mimic one. Lunix, Rowan said. Give her limited access to the comm system. Access granted, the AI replied. Sayla stepped forward, her markings beginning to pulse. She placed her hands on the panel. Slowly, her light patterns synced with the ship's systems. A low hum filled the cockpit. Rowan watched as the enemy ships veered off, chasing a phantom signal. The tension in his shoulders eased, but only slightly. They bought it. Sayla looked drained, sweat on her brow, but nodded. For now. Rowan powered down the engines. The ship drifted quietly. Through space, the nebula's purple mist outside wrapping them in a protective haze. For a moment, silence returned. He turned toward her. What's really going on? Sayla leaned against the wall. Before my ship was attacked, I accessed secure military files. The patterns didn't make sense. Supply routes exposed, attacks that seemed designed to fail. Someone was feeding information to both sides. Why? Rowan asked. To keep the war going, she said simply. Longer war means more profit for certain companies. Halvern Systems, for example. Rowan stared at her. I've heard that name. They sell weapons to both humans and Terran through different fronts. They want the conflict to continue. Rowan's jaw tightened. I lost my brother in this war. Thought he died for something that mattered. Sayla looked at him, her voice quiet. So did I. Their eyes met for a long moment, heavy with the weight of shared pain. Then Rowan looked away. There's a hidden station on Lunara's third moon, an old listening post. We can hide there. Maybe dig deeper. Sayla nodded, then winced again. If we make it, you're strong. You will, he said. They stayed silent as the ship floated, invisible among the rocks. Rowan finally said, My name's Rowan. Sayla glanced at him, one corner of her mouth twitching. I know. You said it when you argued with your AI. He gave a short laugh. Fair enough. And you are? Sayla. Well, Sayla, he said. Welcome aboard. She lowered herself back into the medbay bed. You know this won't end well. They won't stop hunting us. No, Rowan agreed, watching the stars drift by. But maybe we can stop them first. Somewhere behind them, two massive armies continued to march to the rhythm of a war they no longer controlled. But on, a small ship drifting through shadows, two survivors, once enemies, were beginning to see the truth. And the truth would not be buried forever. The moon base was barely more than a shell, hidden in the shadow of Lunara's rocky cliffs. Once a military listening post, it had been abandoned early in the war. Now it served as a refuge for those who needed to disappear. Rowan brought the Wanderlight in low and fast, landing between jagged stone towers. Dust rose around the landing gear as he powered down the engines. Sayla stood beside him, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes scanning the terrain. Her wounds had mostly healed, though her strength still came and went. She was quiet, but her thoughts ran deep. He could feel it. Inside the base, the power systems groaned to life. Lights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows in the narrow halls. Rowan led the way to the control room, brushing off thick layers of dust from the console. Lunix, bring up the archive access, he said, settling into a chair that creaked under his weight. Sayla sat beside him, her markings dim but steady. This place is off-grid, she said. Good choice. I come here when I need to think, Rowan replied, eyes focused on the screen. Now we dig. For hours they worked side by side. Sayla guided him through decoding encrypted data from her ship's black box. Rowan retrieved backup logs from old military channels. Each piece of information, every connection, slowly built a bigger picture, one that was more disturbing than either of them expected. Halvern Systems, the powerful weapons conglomerate, wasn't just selling arms to both sides. They were planting false intel. They had agents in both the human and Terran military ranks, quietly influencing decisions, steering battles for maximum chaos. It was all part of a pattern. Longer wars, higher profits, and no one the wiser. Rowan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. They've been pulling strings for years. Sayla nodded grimly. And no one questioned it, because hate makes people blind. He looked at her, his voice softer. But you did. She met his gaze. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. I broke into sealed files. That's when we were ambushed. That wasn't random, Rowan said. They knew you'd seen too much. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it all pressing down on them. Then Rowan stood and began pacing. We need to get this out. All of it. Not just to one side, but both. There's a signal tower on Eris Station, Sayla said. Neutral ground, civilian tech hub. If we can reach it, we can send a public broadcast across Alliance and Terran frequencies. Won't be easy, Rowan replied. They'll be watching every channel. Then we'll give them something else to chase, she said with a small smile. Before they could make a full plan, a red light began to blink on the console. Lunix's voice came calmly, too calmly. Incoming vessels, unmarked, fast approach. Rowan's heart sank. They found us. Sayla jumped to her feet, already moving. They must have traced the data we accessed. They grabbed what they could, hard drives, data chips, their weapons. As they ran through the corridor, the floor shook from distant impacts. Explosives. Someone was trying to breach the outer wall. There's an old mining tunnel, Rowan shouted over the rising noise. Leads out to the eastern ridge. If we move fast, we can circle around. They sprinted through the echoing tunnel, dust swirling around their feet. Behind them, the base began to collapse in flashes of fire and smoke. They didn't stop until they reached a rocky slope leading down to a dried-out lake bed. Parked near the bottom was a small scout ship, mostly intact, likely forgotten during an old survey mission. Rowan pried open the hatch. It's not much, but it flies. They scrambled inside. Sayla took the co-pilot seat, breathing hard. Set course for Eris. The ship launched into the sky, streaking past debris and rising smoke. Below them, the base that once sheltered their secret now burned away, and above them, warships circled like vultures. Multiple lock-ons, Lunix warned. Rowan gripped the controls. Then let's give them a reason to chase. They darted into a thick meteor cluster, dodging bursts of plasma. Sayla reached into the comms console, manipulating it with smooth precision. Her markings glowed brighter now, syncing with the system. Sending out 3 decoy signatures, she said, fingers moving quickly. They'll think we split up. Rowan risked a glance at her. That might buy us time. As the scout ship slipped behind a moon's orbit, most of the pursuing vessels broke away, following the false trails. Only one followed closely, a sleek black interceptor. Rowan growled under his breath. They're persistent. Sayla narrowed her eyes. Then we outrun them. They made the jump to light speed moments before the interceptor fired, the stars stretching into streaks around them. In the silence that followed, Rowan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Beside him, Sayla sat back, her expression unreadable. We're not safe yet, she said. No, Rowan agreed. But we're closer. They looked at each other then, not as enemies, not even as strangers, but as two people caught in a storm, holding on to the same thread of hope. The truth was now in their hands. And soon, the whole galaxy would see what had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. The halls of Eris Station buzzed with quiet urgency. Built as a neutral tech hub orbiting a small sun, the station had become a meeting point for smugglers, traders, refugees, and now, 2 fugitives carrying a truth powerful enough to shake empires. Rowan and Sayla stepped off the scout ship wearing plain clothes and worn expressions. Their journey had left them bruised, tired, and hunted, but they hadn't come this far to hide. Tucked safely in Rowan's bag was a data core holding every piece of evidence they'd gathered, proof of years of deception, war manipulation, and corporate greed. They were met by Mira, a soft-spoken resistance technician with tired eyes and a steady hand. She led them through a maze of back halls into a hidden communication room, shielded by outdated but effective tech. "You're sure this data will hold up?" Mira asked, as Sayla handed her the drive. "It's all there," Sayla replied. "Military movements, intercepted messages, payments, even names. Enough to start a fire no one can put out." Mira didn't smile, but her voice softened. "Then let's light it." While Mira prepared the transmission, Rowan and Sayla sat side by side in the cramped room. Neither spoke at first. The silence wasn't awkward, it was full. Heavy with everything they had survived. Everything they still had to face. Finally, Rowan broke the quiet. "If this works, if people listen, it could change everything." Sayla nodded. "Or we become targets for the rest of our lives." "I can live with that," Rowan said. "As long as we stop this madness." She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You still believe in peace?" He met her gaze. "I believe in you." A soft chime interrupted them. Mira looked up from the console. "Ready." The data was uploaded to every major communication channel on both sides of the war, broadcasts sent across human and Terran networks. The feed began with hard numbers, weapon shipments, attack patterns, false intelligence trails. Then came the documents, the recordings, the payments linking both governments to the same shadowed group, Halvern Systems. The final blow was a video, recorded by Rowan and Sayla themselves, standing side by side, explaining the truth in clear, quiet voices. It was undeniable, and the galaxy reacted. Within hours, riots broke out in major cities. Soldiers on both sides began refusing orders. News networks abandoned regular programming to replay the broadcast over and over. High-ranking officials were called into emergency meetings. Civilian leaders demanded answers. People who had once cheered for war now shouted for truth. By nightfall, both governments agreed to a temporary ceasefire. 2 days later, Rowan and Sayla stood before the Interworld Assembly, a grand hall where representatives from all known systems gathered. They were no longer fugitives. They were witnesses, symbols of what the war had hidden and what peace could become. An older human diplomat stepped forward, voice steady but weary. "We've learned that we were manipulated, divided, and used. But today we begin to heal." A Terran elder followed, her voice rich and deep. "We are not enemies by nature, only by design. That design has been broken." When Rowan and Sayla were called to speak, they stood together at the center of the chamber. Rowan looked out at the crowd, then down at Sayla, whose markings shimmered with calm determination. "I spent years trying to forget the war," he said. "But I've learned that peace isn't something we wait for. It's something we build." Sayla stepped forward. "We were taught to fear each other. I no longer believe in fear. I believe in choice. And today, we choose peace." Applause rose like a wave. Weeks passed. The ceasefire held. Investigations began. Trials were called. Halvern Systems collapsed under the weight of its crimes. But something more powerful began growing. An idea. That two people, once enemies, had made a different choice. That maybe others could too. Plan was proposed for a new colony. A place where humans and Terran could live together, not as conquerors or survivors, but as neighbors. They called it Solara, a new name for a new hope. Rowan and Sayla were offered leadership roles in the colony's development, not as politicians, but as symbols. They accepted, not for the recognition, but for the promise. They arrived on Solara, months later stepping onto red soil under a sky painted with two suns. It was raw and wild, but full of life. Teams from both species worked together, building homes, schools, greenhouses. It wasn't perfect. Old wounds don't heal overnight. But it was real. One evening, as the light faded into a calm twilight, Rowan and Sayla sat together overlooking the colony. A child's laughter echoed in the distance. The wind carried the scent of fresh soil and possibility. "Do you think this will last?" Rowan asked. Sayla didn't answer immediately. Her fingers found his. "It's up to us." They sat in silence, watching the stars appear one by one. In a world born from pain, they had planted something new. Not just peace, but the beginning of understanding. And in that understanding, a future.